This week on Quality Digest Live, we examine why new fuel-efficient automobiles may not get better gas mileage.
Plus, Tom Pyzdek joins us to discuss how gaming the metrics often turns out to be a losing proposition. That and more when we come back.
Today's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is Sparta Systems. TrackWise by Sparta Systems enables quality, manufacturing, and regulatory affairs professionals to streamline processes, consolidate redundant systems, and reduce manual operations for increased revenue. Visit spartasystems.com.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 13th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. Before we get started, I want to remind you all that you can always email us at qdl@qualitydigest.com if you have a question that you want to get on the air. We have a very interesting guest with us this week.
Tom Pyzdek.
Tom Pyzdek is going to be joining us here in about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you have some questions for Tom, please go ahead and email them to us again, qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll get them on the air when Tom's segment comes on a little later. Okay, we're going to start this week as usual with a pair of news items. First up, a recent survey from the International Accreditation Forum revealed a strong perceived value to Nadcap. For those of you who don't know, Nadcap stands for the National Aerospace and Defense Contractors Accreditation Program.
There you go.
Which is administered by the Performance Review Institute. Nadcap accreditation is intended to help enhance and standardize the special manufacturing processes and products found across the complex global supply chains of the aerospace industry. The IAF's recent survey, which garnered 4,000 responses, turned up a few very interesting items. For example, more than 80% of respondents reported that Nadcap certification added value to their organization. Half of the respondents saw a direct increase in sales due to certification. And although only a third of respondents said that certification was a customer requirement, the vast majority stated that it was important to their customers. The moral of the story is that Nadcap certification is a value-added activity for those who undertake it, and not just because it helps them get and keep customers. The rigor of the system also helps improve standardization, augment visual inspection, and increase productivity. In short, according to the survey, Nadcap helps participating companies improve overall quality. To find out more, read the story link just beneath the player page right here.
And I would add to that, pretty much what they're saying there is pretty much what we know to be true for quality management systems in general. This happens to be for aerospace, but whether it's for automotive or any sector-specific standard, if you're working on improving your system and you're doing it for the improvement aspect,
right,
and not just to look good in some customers' eyes, you're probably on the right track.
On the right track, exactly right.
So we've got another kind of a interesting metrology story today. New research by the United Kingdom's National Physical Laboratory and the Scottish University's Environmental Research Centre will help improve the accuracy of estimates of the time of geological events. This is where they're trying to estimate, based on rocks, how old something is in geological time. The work centers on the calibration of one of the world's slowest clock, which is the Argon clock. This clock is really slow. It measures the ratio of, that was really silly. Okay.
That was really bad.
Okay. It measures the ratio of radioactive potassium in a sample of rock to the amount of its decay product, which is argon. Scientists already know the half-life of this radioactive decay, which is about 1.25 billion years. So it can be used to date rocks back to the time of Earth's formation 4.5 billion years ago. So scientists say that the new improved calibration would mean up to a 1.2% difference in a rock's age from the original calculation. So you're thinking, well, 1% in 2 billion years, They're actually shooting for a 0.1% precision. That's actually their goal. So a 1% increase in the precision that they're getting with this new calibration is actually a pretty significant breakthrough. So scientists believe that the improved accuracy will help do things such as better establish the eruptive histories of volcanoes and predict the future behavior of younger volcanoes.
Great, great.
There you go.
Thanks, Dirk. And may I say, you rock. Okay, now on to this week's feature articles. First is The Case of the Missing Gas Mileage, which appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. This piece, written by Peter Dzikis, and forgive me, Peter, if I mispronounced your last name, originally ran in MIT News, and they graciously granted us permission to rerun it in QDD. Well, interesting article again from MIT News and from Peter Dzikis. This article talked about gas mileage, and it talked about gas mileage as kind of as a counterpoint to the idea that cars are more fuel efficient, or being built to be more fuel efficient these days. However, gas mileage has not really gone up. Now, major automakers, of course, have increased fuel efficiency in recent years, yet again, these increases haven't really reflected itself on the roads. Why? Because car makers have offset some of the technological innovations like fuel injection systems, multiple camshafts, variable speed transmissions, with heavier automobiles with greater power. As a result, gas mileage in the U.S. automobiles has only increased from 23 mpg in 1980 to 27 mpg on average in current year.
Even though much more would have been capable.
Exactly right. Now, if according to the research that we reported on in the story, that was reported on in the stories, if those innovations to increase fuel efficiency were embedded in cars that had the same body weight, curb weight, and transmission and horsepower
and so forth,
of cars from 1980, the equivalent MPG would be 37. So that there would be a big increase. Or in other words, there has been a huge increase in fuel efficiency. Has not been reflected in the gas mileage, of course. So why? And well, the answer is pretty simple. I mean, duh, we're talking about Americans, bigger,
customers,
faster, more powerful cars. Who doesn't want that, right? I mean,
we're driving this, so to speak.
Exactly right. The American consumer is driving this because they're the ones that are demanding this. This is what they're saying is what we want is these bigger, faster cars, and they're willing to pay more at the pump for this. Generally speaking, they're saying, okay, I want the car I want. Kind of a I'm the consumer, I'll tell you what I want issue, and I'm willing to again pay for that if I have to. This brings up a point to me. I think automobiles, I think, are more they're more metaphor than they really are product. You know, for some people, an automobile is just basic transportation. For others, it's status symbol or sex symbol in many cases.
Have you seen your car?
No, I'm not talking about my car.
And if that's a sex symbol, buddy, you're in trouble.
I am not talking about my car. I want to put
you're
a
married, but you're
disclaimer.
going to be single for the rest of your life.
Thank you for bringing that up, Derek. I had forgot about that. But in any event, but what a car is, to many people as well, and these other things, is it's a political statement. I mean, think about it. Think about it. If you drive a Ford F-350 or a Cadillac Escalade versus a Toyota Prius, what are you saying about your habits in terms of where you want to, what economies you want to support nationally? What are you saying about your belief in what your finances are, what you can afford to drive? What are you saying about your political place in the spectrum of the idea of emissions and carbon emissions and climate change? Now, the author of this piece, Peter Dzikis, is using a study done by a gentleman by the name of Christopher Nittell. Now, he's an MIT economist, and his piece was called "Automobiles on Steroids." was the study that he did, and he looked at this and he said, well, this really is about climate change. It's about the changes that carbon emissions, usage of gas, has for the environmental changes and climate change, obviously. Now, anytime, of course,
that was a hot button.
You mentioned that, you're going to have a lot of readers. A lot of our readers always pile onto this argument, and we had several comments, and I encourage you to read them. They're interesting. Some of them are very long and intricate about CO2 emissions and what that really means. And is this reality or is it myth? And I don't want to take a position on it.
But that's not what the article was about.
But that's not what the article was about. The article was really about manufacturing and about customers. I think it was about how you serve customers and what customers want. Christopher Nittell, again, the economist who authored the survey that this story jumped off on at MIT, talked about a gas tax. He talked about the idea that really the way to solve this is to kind of force Americans to say, well, you're going to pay a lot more at the pump. And yes, gas prices certainly have gone up a lot in recent years. But if you look at it from 1980 to now, in terms of real dollars, it really hasn't gone up at all.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is, we're not really any better off. As a matter of fact, in many cases, you can say we're worse off. We're certainly pumping a lot more carbon into the air. However you feel about it, hey, better
It's still
gas
pollution,
mileage.
no matter
It's still
what.
pollution,
Yeah, yeah,
but however you feel about it, I mean, the idea is that better gas mileage is better gas mileage. You know, who doesn't want to get more gas mileage and get more for their buck when you go to the pump, especially if there were to be a gas tax, which very well possibly may be in the future, a higher gas tax. So I think to me the story was really about customers, how customers drive, how manufacturers handle things, and how engineers who design a product like a car, which is, as I say, a metaphor as much as it is a product, how those engineers at different levels of the manufacturing process can drive or not drive the habits of the customers. But the customers ultimately are the ones that have to decide what it is they want, what they're willing to pay for, and what they value above all else. That's really what the story is about. Interesting story.
Yeah, it is that whole, and we've talked about this before, the whole interaction between, you know, you have the customer clamoring for one thing. In this case, you have, you know, kind of the government that's kind of, the government trying to drive down the, you know, the kind of the cafe, the whole cafe thing, oh gosh, he talks about it in here. Capital CAFE, which is the requirements for more fuel efficient
cars by 2025.
Exactly. So it's funny so the manufacturers are actually on the technological end could completely do this.
Have no problem with that.
But what people want to buy kind of completely undermines the technology that is currently out there.
You know, I don't want to say it's easily done, but it certainly can be done that those fuel efficiency standards, 50, 60 miles per gallon, could really be met without too much of a hassle. But is the American consumer, and particularly the American consumer, willing to sacrifice horsepower, curb weight, all that stuff, the status symbol part of this? Don't know. We're going to find that out, though, in coming years.
Maybe you should consider buying a new car.
Yeah.
Okay, our next article was by Tom Pyzdek. It was called Gaming the Metrics. And the subhead on this one was Use Metrics to Guide Improvement, Not Measure the Performance of People. And we're going to bring Tom on here in just one second, but the idea behind the article is that sometimes metrics, even well-meaning metrics, and even maybe you're measuring the right thing, but you're using them for the wrong purpose. And with us right now via Skype is Tom Pyzdek. Tom, do we have you with us?
I hope so. I'm here.
Oh, great. Some of you listening, we may be having a little bit of audio problems, a little bit of buzz, but just tune that out,
please,
so to speak. So Tom, you know, tell us a little bit, when you say gaming the metrics, number, what do you mean gaming the metrics, and give us maybe a couple of examples.
Well, there's a natural tendency of human beings to look as good as they can. You know, you mentioned the automobile as a status symbol, but the metrics we use to track our performance are also something that's near and dear to our hearts. So if you're a baseball player, let's say a position player, your batting average and your error count is very important. If you're a pitcher, you know, you have numbers that are important to you as a pitcher, the ERA, for example. In the business world, we also measure performance, and quite often those measurements are used to determine what someone's pay, whether or not they're going to be promoted, whether or not they're going to be disciplined or fired if these metrics are not correct. And we all know, all of us in the quality improvement profession, that the system is often more important than the person's individual efforts. And when we judge people by metrics that they have either little or no influence over, there's a tendency to try to make those metrics look good in other ways.
Okay, and what's the result of that? I mean, when people game the metrics, as you say, what does that do other than on a personal level they're cheating?
Well, on the quality improvement, from the quality improvement perspective, we're distorting data. So it's giving us a misleading picture of the process or product that we're trying to make an improvement to. So for example, inspectors, if you look at histograms of inspection data, what you'll often find is right at the specification limits, there's a peak that goes up. And where you should have a nice smooth normal curve, you have a gap past the spec limit before you have any data. And we call that flinching. So what's happening is the inspector doesn't want to take a marginal measurement to the supervisor and cause all kinds of trouble and cause a stir. So what they do is, if anything is close but no cigar, they'll bring that in. So they'll fudge that metric in so that it doesn't require any additional effort on their part. They don't have to reject parts or shut down processes. But it's a distortion. And what that indicates is there's a fear factor. I was an inspector for a number of years, and I can tell you that when you bring the bad news to a supervisor that their process isn't meeting the requirements, there's some hell to pay. You get into arguments and disputes just like a close call in a basketball game. And you'd rather avoid that hassle. Now, if something is considerably outside of the requirements, that's not an issue. But if something's close, there's a tendency to game that and to fudge it. If you have an old-fashioned micrometer, you might lean on it a little bit just to bring it in, for example.
So let's explore this a little bit. You say one of the reasons people game or you use the word fudge, or if it's something on the edge, well, we'll just put it on the good side of the edge rather than on the bad side of the edge, is out of fear. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, as I say, if you're an inspector and you're known for being very strict and rejecting things that are anywhere near out of spec, there's going to be a tendency to look at you as not a team player, as someone who's not interested in the bigger picture, just only interested in these rigid guidelines. It's going to be a career-limiting move for you to reject any more than you have to. So there's a fear of reprisal and ostracism, and just a natural tendency to make that metric look as good as we all hope it will look. As a teacher, for example, when I have a grade that's borderline, I really have a lot more work on my hands than if I have a passing grade. So, someone who's borderline beyond my passing grade, I have a real desire to bring that in. I may look at my questions and see if they're vague. I may look at their answers and see if I can give them partial credit. So just trying to avoid the stress that goes along with bad news, and bad news being metrics that don't measure up to the requirements.
Okay, so actually now I'm hearing two things. One is there may be a fear of if you don't want to be the bearer of bad news. You don't want to be the person constantly reporting something out of spec. So if it's on the edge, you may fudge it towards the good side just to keep in everybody's good graces, maybe make yourself look better. But now you're saying there's also another aspect where it's easier just to say yay or nay if it's on the edge, and might as well be yay, than it is to have to go through the extra effort of really trying to narrow it down and how close to the edge is it? Is it really over? Is it not? It just takes more work once you're right on the edge of a spec.
Right, and it also applies to management data. So for example, if my productivity numbers are being tracked and I'm in a system that uses activity-based costing in the wrong way, I may be measured based on how much I utilize a particular piece of equipment. And so what I'll tend to do to get efficiency down, I have a certain setup cost that I have to amortize. I'll run that equipment perhaps longer than I really need to meet customer demand. But the result's going to be my metric looks good, but the company is stuck with work in process inventory that is adding cost to the overall product. And there are a lot of things done that are driven by accounting metrics that are harmful to people in the Lean Six Sigma and quality professions, because they actually have negative results for the organization as a whole.
Okay, so what is the solution to this? I mean, if you don't want people to game the metrics, how do you set up your organization or whatever you're doing differently so that that isn't the case?
Well, in terms of changing accounting systems, for example, there are systems that are developed by the theory of constraints people called throughput accounting. There's lean accountings that will let you measure the process or the value stream or the organization rather than measuring individual people within that organization. So from my point of view, the ideal metric is one that's designed to help us get better. And I think we get better by looking at metrics that measure an important outcome and also metrics that measure drivers of that outcome. So we're trying to identify a cause and effect relationship that we can use to make changes that will make the overall outcome and result better. And these metrics, first of all, there'll be far fewer of them because we're going to focus on the critical few. And secondly, they're measuring the performance of the system. And from a management or leadership point of view, that's really what we're interested in. It doesn't take a number to determine if somebody is working hard and is capable or they're sloughing off and incompetent. That's more of an understanding of the people who work for you. And I don't think metrics serve that purpose very well.
Well, you know, Tom, you're kind of touching on. We did get a question in here from one of our viewers. It's kind of a long question. I think we can glean from it what's going on here. Nice article, Tom. There seems to be some gray area, however. You use the pronouns I, we, they, and someone as gaming the metrics. If broken down to employee classifications in the production world, the grunts on the floor don't have the option to change any portion of the metric formula that you use other than their own performance as it relates to defects. That's not gaming, that's performance, and in 15 years of floor-level production, I welcomed the scrutiny. Another 15 years in supervisory positions showed me that the practice of metrics gaming only applies to upper management and that real performance on the floor is well served by the use of metrics. Have I missed your point? I think what he's saying is that maybe you do have to use metrics to evaluate, I guess, the person as opposed to the system. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think, and it also I think ties a little bit into something that Tom mentioned in his article about Deming's red bead experiment. I think the idea that that it's employee performance on the floor at the very bottom level, at the basic level, I should say, is kind of random. That a lot of these metrics don't necessarily apply to the variances in normal performance of normal employees. Is that a proper take on that, Tom?
Well, first let me clarify when I use pronouns, I, we, and they. I and we, we're the good guys, and they are the bad guys. So we need to make that really clear. So none of us would game metrics, of course. We're all, far above such behavior, but they would. And so we have to be very careful. But no, Mike, I believe that the tendency to, game a metric, it runs up and down the spectrum and of the hierarchy of management. I've worked as a blue-collar worker. I was a union steward, and I saw as much gaming at the floor level and shop level as I do at senior leadership levels. It's just that when the worker bees do the gaming, it generally doesn't have as much of an impact as when the higher ups do, because they have a more limited scope. But it's just as tempting for a person who's made a defective product to try to hide that fact as it is for a manager who's implemented a defective program or plan, to the extent that metrics will uncover that, they're gamed and they're hidden. So I've seen people in manufacturing positions, for example, play around with the production counts and try to meet a certain quota by, ramping up just before the end of an accounting period, even though it would be better for the organization as a whole if the process produced, according to tack time and was more smooth. Okay. So okay. I would, be a good topic to discuss with the reader over a beer, but I disagree that there's one group in the company that's more prone to gaming than another.
I think I know this. I think I know this guy, and he'd probably welcome a beer. So,
There you go.
Tom, thanks for, we're out of time here, so thanks for joining us and kind of going through your article and explaining what I think is a pretty interesting topic, one that probably I think a lot of people can relate to. So we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Well, my pleasure, Dirk, and I want to remind everyone that it's an election year, and you're going to see a lot of metrics gaming going on this year.
Yes, we will. Yes. All right, Tom, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you next time. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Dirk, for doing that as well. Good, yeah, interesting piece. I think there's a lot of meat there and a lot of applicability for what a lot of us are doing every day,
right.
and thinking about it. But the question was a fair one, really, and I think Tom addressed it. The idea that it does go up and down the spectrum. But I think yeah, the people on the floor that are at the business end of the machine literally are less likely, less able to, less freedom.
Right. It's a little bit more strict for them what's going on.
I think so. Definitely great. Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Dirk. Well, that's our show for the week. But before we wrap up, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's show, Sparta Systems. For more than 15 years, Sparta's TrackWise software has enabled professionals to improve processes and increase revenue. Please take a moment to visit www.spartasystems.com to learn more.
And next week, Monday, in fact, our lead story will be by one of our favorite authors, Bill Levinson.
Bill, right.
And it's going to deal with offshoring.
Yes, the benefits of buying U.S. versus...
The benefits of buying U.S. That's a hot topic for Bill, and he points out some interesting points.
As always.
Points out interesting points.
That's right. That's a good thing to point out. So we'll look forward
to uninteresting points, I suppose. Okay.
We will look forward to that from Bill this week coming up in Quality Digest Daily. So that's our Quality Digest Live for today. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, all of you out there, for joining us. And I want to wish you all a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.
Three, two, one, fire.